Now we're moving on to a session with Morgan Stanley's David Wu on revolutionizing financial advisory, Morgan Stanley's innovative use of large language models. David is a managing director at Morgan Stanley and wealth management head of knowledge management, where he's responsible for improving the experience for wealth management employees and finding accurate and high quality information with speed and precision. As part of this mandate, his team is responsible for the content curation and oversight processes, the content platforms, including the 3DR portal leveraged by wealth management, the content management system, search engines, and leading edge technologies such as the virtual assistant and NLP. Previously, David was the COO, for Wealth Management Analytics and Data, where he was responsible for business administration and group strategy, held analytics, business development, and data strategy roles at Credit Suisse, and provided business and technology strategy expertise at Deloitte. David graduated from the Stern School of Business at New York University with dual majors in finance and accounting. David, really happy you're here. Please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And what I would say is my day job involves something called knowledge management, which effectively means over the last several years, I've been focused on getting our folks information faster, because we believe in the wealth management world we're knowledge workers, and knowledge workers with better knowledge allows them to serve our clients a little bit better. So I'm following up today, not to talk as much the details around the technology, which my colleagues, Blaze and folks have went through in detail. I'm more here to talk to you about how we are leveraging our partnership with OpenAI to accelerate how we can help our wealth management advisors and our clients. So if I were to take a step back really quick on where we are on this, we are a large organization in wealth management that's focused on a number of different channels and providing financial advisory services. And specifically, if you look at kind of the growth of the Morgan Stanley wealth management space, about 5-6 years ago when I joined the organization, we had about 2.5 million clients across 16,000 financial advisors. We subsequently have built out an MS at Work, workplace participant business that now adds another 12 million equity and retirement plan participants into our world. And we've also, through our acquisition of E-Trade, added another 5 million self-directed clients into our space. So in our world, though, at that same pace, we have not grown at the same number of employees, but we're now exposed to nearly 20 million clients and participants. And as we think about how to provide service to these clients and participants, we're thinking through these 4 boxes you see horizontally, including we have a deep bench of products and across both investments and banking that we need to think through how do we identify to bring the best product to our clients. We have world-class researchers across virtually any domain in our organization, and how do we tap into the expertise from them and make that accessible? Obviously, with 20 million people to service, you got to think about how are we providing the quality service ranging from opening accounts, processing, dealing with equity plans, and then how do we engage with this broader universe of clients with meaningful communications that's hyper-personalized to their respective situations. Well, that's not easy, right? And while we have world-class financial advisors, we need to support them with world-class content, expertise, and use technology to get this type of data and expertise to the right folks. So that I just wanted to set the scene for why we embarked on leveraging into the capabilities of the likes of OpenAI. So where we are is prior to the launch of ChatGPT, we've actually been working with OpenAI for a better part of a year and a half. And at the time when we first engaged with them, they were not widely known across most communities. And now, due to the rise of ChatGPT, I think they've become a household name that folks ranging my friends, family, all are aware of some of these capabilities. But as we thought about how do we leverage these capabilities for our users, we spent actually considerable amount of time just trying to figure out where to even start. And when it came back to us for our core philosophy is at the end of the day, we believe that it's our human beings that are the best in the world at what they do. We think it's our financial advisors. We think it's their support staff. We think it's the research analysts, the banking specialists, the product specialists who can literally find you any type of investment vehicle that's suitable to your respective financial need. And it's the promise that we're trying to realize is, how do we maximize their capability, but give them really high quality machines? And if we do so, we're really focused around driving automation of many of these tasks that they perform today, and shifting people from a culture of editing to trusting a machine to maybe take that first pass at giving them an answer to a question so that they don't have to ask around, or giving them potentially even a first draft of an email that goes out to a prospective client. It's shifting people and the work that they do, particularly financial advisors, from the tasks that aren't related to what they do best, which is engaging with people, talking to their existing clients, and identifying new clients. Now, as we've been going through kind of our journey for the past year and a half with OpenAI and large language models, the role of the human continues to come into play, right? And we learned that as much as we believe out of the box, the system, it can do everything, which, by the way, it's far and away done better than conventional previous technology in solving many of these problems or tasks. We still learned there's 4 elements of humans we need to think about incorporating. The first is gathering the ask, right? It was actually extremely difficult for us to know even where to start, because understanding where the pain points are, and then understanding, is generative AI the right type of technology to ascertain and solve those pain points, took a lot of time. And so we spent a good amount of time gathering what are the needs, what are even the types of questions, or what are the types of tasks, what are the types of functions that you would most benefit from having this system? How would you leverage that? And then using this, we start to figure out where are the highest opportunities and what is the associated effort to solve those. The second thing, as we thought about humans, we need to realize is curate the knowledge, right? As many folks know, ChatGPT and the GPT LLM technology have access to tremendous source of training. Well, unfortunately, a lot of that training ends in 2021, which doesn't capture the types of expertise that we have up until April 25th, 2023. So this is an area where we think, again, at Morgan Stanley, we have the best intellectual capital across virtually any domain as it relates to financial services. So we put a lot of thought into how do we curate our internal knowledge, but use the capabilities and the understanding and reasoning of GPT to access this. So that takes work. We spend a lot of time working with hundreds of authors, taxonomists, to better understand how do we organize our knowledge, which includes our content, our data, even who is the right person who that can answer more information in depth about a particular topic. Once we gather the need, once we start to organize our inventory, we start to work really closely to start thinking about UX. As anyone who has heard of the recent Microsoft Bing GPT integration, this is a paradigm shift, right? And for companies that have traditionally relied on the search experience, the integration of ChatGPT answers into that experience could potentially not only impact the bottom line, but it's going to impact a lot of where eyeballs go. So we think a lot around the fact that we at Morgan Stanley have many applications that a financial advisor needs to swivel from. So we need to think about how do we allow an end user to access the underlying data, perform the functions, or access the information that comes out of these, and how do you do it in a way that the user will intuitively understand how to get it done. And lastly, and I think this is probably the most key aspect to the entire flywheel, how do you collect feedback and train, right? We have spent significant amount of months prototyping on a number of use cases. And one of the things that we realized we need to do is figure out how do we get access to as many individuals who are willing to be on the cutting edge innovation frontier and start to evaluate how well the system was performing on a range of tasks. And that actually meant going out to hundreds of financial advisors, their support staff, internal employees across virtually every business area in wealth management to make sure that we understood how the quality of the GPT responses would perform, and then work closely with a combination of our technology team and OpenAI to configure better outcomes in cases where the tasks did not meet expectation. So having gone through the background, I'm going to spend a little bit of time around where our initial focus has been. So, to the point, I keep reiterating the power of the intellectual capital that we have at Morgan Stanley. We targeted the first use case being something that we thought would add high value, but also at the same time, not a use case that was so highly sensitive that we in financial services, being a heavily regulated industry, would struggle to even get off the ground. So we said, let's focus on getting internal information back to our internal employees as quickly and as accurately as possible. So we have a corpus of nearly 100,000 documents that are regularly accessed by our 40,000 employees in wealth management. We said, let's develop a virtual assistant chatbot, and let's take the GPT-4 capabilities and take that and put it in our virtual assistants to essentially give a jetpack of knowledge and understanding that we can then use to better generate the answer. So what we're doing in the outcomes is for every question that is being asked of our corpus, we're working to identify the most relevant article for the question, because we want to make sure folks understand that the information and the answers are coming from our internal corpus. The second is we spend a lot of time trying to tune the right quality of answer that covers both accuracy, completeness, timeliness. And then we ask a lot of our human beings who are users, both in the prototype stage and now in our actual pilot stage, to give us feedback, right? So we started with this question answering virtual assistant use case. We're also exploring other use cases around auto-generating summaries of particularly longer form content, such as research reports. We're using the GPT-4 embeddings model to help us think through search enhancements. And we're also thinking about better ways that we can organize our internal content by leveraging LLMs in the form of taxonomy creation enablement. So just wanted to show you a screenshot. This is a illustrative prototype of a virtual assistant that we have live out. And when the question, how can my client set up a Morgan Stanley Align account comes up, we are tapping not to the externally trained public internet knowledge, but we are connecting it and saying, you must generate the answer from Morgan Stanley Wealth Management's corpus. So in this case, the system recognized the question and it started to generate the answer that comes straight from the source, which is Morgan Stanley Online, and then it constructed an answer based on the source. So to the whole point around how do we prove to folks that this is not making something up? Step one, demonstrate that you went through our corpus to identify the most relevant snippets of text. And then step two, feed that into GPT-4's context window so it can start to generate an answer. There's a couple things that we're also doing that are not actually available to show in this particular screen. One is if you actually as to how the system was able to retrieve the answers. So I'll actually explain step by step how it got there. And then in our actual pilot phase, we've started to put in thumbs up, thumbs down, and we've built up of a team, both the local and overseas, whose job it is to review every thumbs up and thumbs down and to identify opportunities where we could either improve the quality of the output in the form of sometimes we need to generate more content. We never wrote a piece of content about that particular question, or sometimes there's work that we need to do into improving the quality of retrieving the right relevant text, or in the way that we engineer the prompting of the GPT completion. So where we are now is we're live in pilot, and we're planning to roll these types of capabilities out on a question answering use case throughout the entire wealth management firm over the next few months. And that's the first start of when we aim to tap into our overall GPT capabilities. However, in our over a year and a half that we've been working with OpenAI and that we've been exploring these types of capabilities, a number of learnings have come up that I think is really important to share. The first one is you got to mobilize the organization, right? We have 40,000 people. And though it's interesting to come up with all these different ideas, to drive business value, you have to socialize and show as many people the art of the possible and get them to better understand where GPT is good for, such as generating text, versus where it may not be the best tool in itself, such as predict future or forecast future revenues, right? The second thing we learned is ChatGPT and large language models are not enough on their own. In order to solve the use case of answering questions from our content, we need to think about how do we integrate it into our existing content platforms, such as Adobe Experience Manager that we use. We need to think about how do we start to incorporate a vector search retrieval to help us better crawl and identify the snippets of text that are most similar to the type of question being asked. And then how do we even connect it to the front end existing infrastructure or apps where people are coming to consume this type of information? Quality control in your corpus, right? We talk about the danger of ChatGPT hallucinating based on public information. Well, that can apply to your internal information, right? As part of my knowledge management function, even before ChatGPT or LLMs, we spent 5 years putting together content quality, rules, processes, workflows, along with build out teams to help work with our hundreds of authors that publish content across virtually every domain to make sure that they're following the rules, they're trying to update outdated content, and they're addressing any feedback that comes in from our users. I think that type of foundational cleanup work is going to be critical, because the danger of GPT technologies is you're potentially, as we know, introducing misinformation at scale, which will happen if you have poor content. Involving your stakeholder community early to evaluate thoughtfully. Before we even went into our pilot with the virtual assistants, we spent about 4 or 5 months developing a prototype that was simply a white box with a pretty basic screen. But having hundreds of people come in and interact with it to ask questions of our corpus was incredibly powerful in understanding what are ways that we can improve A, the search retrieval process, B, the prompt completion process, and even frankly, C, the content process, right? So I encourage everyone to don't wait too long to get your stakeholders involved and get them comfortable to know that this is experimentation and prototyping, and get them comfortable with knowing that their feedback is really, really important. We even did things like have contests or gave us some gifts for those folks that gave us the most thumbs up, thumbs down with comments in terms of the quality of the responses. Embrace the innovation mindset, right? It's really hard to get some of the responses the way you want, right? While it seems early and easy to put in a prompt into ChatGPT and get an answer, in the world of financial services, we have a very high threshold for accuracy. So that means we had to get our team comfortable with what are the different ways that you can engineer a prompt to generate a better answer, right? So we got our teams, not just my team, but also our stakeholders comfortable with the idea of, hey, you got to play around with this machine, right? And be patient with it, but try out different ways that you'll get the response you're looking for. For us, my high recommendation is GPT-4 and OpenAI is out early and is the leaders in this space. But what I've personally seen is a year ago when I went and presented across our senior organization around the capabilities of OpenAI, people didn't really understand what I was talking about in many cases. Fortunately, since the launch of ChatGPT in November, it feels like virtually every technology company in the world has now put in their GPT strategy, which frankly makes it feel almost like the .com or the mobile app rise over the last 20, 30 years. So I think it's important to stay nimble. More competitors will introduce their large language models. Some competitors will introduce smaller forms of these that may not be 175 billion parameters or trillion parameters. I think it's important to just stay nimble and keep your eyes out to how this role will change. And then I think for us, because we are heavily regulated, we keep very close eye to what are the changes that potentially come from Europe, in the case of what happened with Italy, GDPR, and certainly the US, where most recently the Biden administration is looking out for public comment on the state of these large language models. So I think it's important you just stay flexible and stay nimble and stay close to how the world will change, which is coming very quickly. And then lastly, and this may be something that is probably more unique to our industry in financial services as well as healthcare, but one of the things that we do is we spend a lot of time with our legal, compliance, and risk partners, because as you can imagine, our exposure being a bank is much, much higher, that if we don't get this right, it'll create reputational risks and it will impact our ability. And not just reputational risk, it would be financial risk, a whole number of risks that could impact our relationship with our nearly 20 million clients and participants. So every week we spend hours with our legal, compliance, and risk partners. We don't see them as a inhibitor. We view it as their comfort, and the more time we spend getting them comfortable with where this technology works and doesn't work, the more likely that we'll be able to move along and achieve the potential out of this technology, which ultimately we think is going to lead to a day where our best players, our best financial advisors, are going to win even more through better access to our technology and better access to our expertise and data. So
thanks for that, David. Fascinating to see someone actually putting this into practice in a production environment, actually doing something within their business. A lot of questions came in just to give the audience some fodder for what others are thinking about around the timeline for when this started and how long it took to come from idea inception to actually something rolling out in either a beta state or in a first iteration of production. A lot of questions about client and company secrets and how you're protecting against leakage. So let's start off with that first question about how much content cleanup and what kind of cleanup tasks did you do before you pointed GPT at your content?
Yeah, great question. So, and I'll go back even before GPT. When I took this function over, we had just in our corporate intranet, we had about 60,000 documents, many of which had been stale for years. So it wasn't pretty. I hired a team and we went by almost door to door and went through every department and said, look, which of this content do you actually need? And we had spreadsheets with historical views, last update date, all the metadata fields. And over a span of about a year and a half, we went from 60,000 to 20,000 documents, right? But it was simply having to create outreach and create accountability. We started to identify senior players across each division or each department that could be accountable for ensuring the quality of their content is good, because we view that as an intellectual advantage.
That makes sense. And so overall, you mentioned it was 18 months or so for that content cleanup phase. How long overall was the journey from the inception of this use case to engaging OpenAI and other partners to actually realizing that production chatbot?
Yeah, so the story is in about when I took over this function in 2018, and we started actually building our chatbots in 2020. So we used a previous technology chatbot platform, right? And we're live with 5 different chatbots, both internal and external. It took us about 2 years to get these chatbots out, which is great. But what we learned along the way is the effort to train these chatbots takes a lot of work, right? We had to sit there and train it on our vocabulary, our intents, our concepts, do a whole lot of data labeling. And then we had to sit there and curate content that could be delivered as answers from the chatbot, which just made it incredibly hard to scale. So 2018 to 2020 was getting the chatbot out. We had 2020 to 2022 was refining it and getting usage. And then given that we did all this upfront work, that by the time late 2022 or late 2023 that we started working with OpenAI, we had already done a lot of that foundational work that really we started this virtual assistant use case back last summer, and we're in pilot now working towards a full rollout over the next couple months that goes out to about 40,000 internal employees.
And how big is your team for this project?
Our team for this project we have a lot of technologists. So I would say on the business side, about 40 people, In terms of data labelers, data reviews, another 20, and then technology, several dozen.
Wow. Well, that's great. Fascinating. We've got to move on now, but I really appreciate your presentation here and taking some time to answer some questions. And the audience, I'm sure, has found this very useful to see someone actually, forging a path here and doing this in production. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you.